What do you do about phone service when moving to France? This is one of those videos about something no one really wants to have to think about, but you do. So, good news, it's going to be cheaper and easier than you think to set up your phone service here in France. Stay with us. Hi, I'm Raina.
This is Jason.
And we're Baguette Bound.
If you're an American moving to France, you're going to need to do two things for phone service. Get a local French number, but first you'll want to keep your US number for certain authentication needs and those family members who just refuse to use WhatsApp.
Why?
We're going to go over the quickest, easiest, cheapest way we found to do both of these and give you an overview of what it's like to set up new cell service here in France.
Yeah. First, you are going to want to keep your US number also, even if you're planning to stay in France forever. Why? Well, first of all, of course, just keeping your same number is going to make it easier to keep in touch with people you know, but maybe more importantly sometimes, allow you to continue to access all those accounts and applications in the US that require two-factor authentication. You know, those little access codes for various accounts that get sent to your phone via text or voicemail. So, and then, you have to put them in whenever you're logging in somewhere. So you might be considering for this the idea of just, keeping your US provider, Verizon, T-Mobile, whoever it is, and adding international coverage, calling it a day and saying it's done.
Yeah, and while this may seem like the easiest path, this may not be the best way to keep your number. First, it's going to cost an arm and a leg. US plans in general, and especially those with coverage in Europe, are outrageously expensive. But maybe even more important is that if too much of your usage is coming from here in Europe, most US phone providers have the right to cancel your plan. Remember, these are temporary travel plans, not I'm moving to Europe plans. So this may not be ideal.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that was a thing.
Yeah. But there is a good solution. We found Google Voice to be the easiest, most cost-effective solution to keep your existing US phone number. Google Voice is an app that you can find on all of the app stores, and it works on all smartphones, tablets, and computers. While using the Google Voice, it looks and feels and operates just like regular cell phone service.
Right.
All your calls and texts are managed through the Google Voice app instead of your phone's native calling or messaging functions. I actually really like this because I know if Google Voice is ringing, it's someone calling my US number. And if my phone's native phone program is ringing, it's someone calling my French number. I can goose myself up for what language I need to be ready to answer the phone.
That's true.
Yeah. But definitely, for me, the best part is that there's no monthly cost to keep your phone number active. And there's no limit on the number of calls or texts you can make either.
Yeah. Okay, so if at this point you're like, oh, sounds amazing, what's the catch here? Well, this isn't a cell or data service. Google Voice only works when you are already connected to the internet. So maybe by Wi-Fi or a data plan by an actual provider. So you will need a separate cell plan or data plan or be connected to Wi-Fi at any time to be able to use that US number. We're going to cover doing that in a few minutes. The second thing that you want to know about Google Voice is you must switch your number before you leave the US. Which means you could have a gap in cell coverage before, from the time you port over your number a few days before you leave the US soil to landing here in France and getting yourself to a cell provider to set up cell coverage. There could be a gap where you don't have any, data or phone service outside of if you're not on Wi-Fi. Okay, a few US phone providers also will not allow you to port your number over to Google Voice, and some providers will charge a small fee for this, think like 20 bucks. And then of course the last thing is if you're in the middle of a long-term contract, you are probably going to get stuck paying an early termination fee to move your phone number away from your current provider and transfer it to Google Voice. So there are a few constraints. We have a link to Google Voice down in the description that will allow you to test whether your number can be transferred to Google Voice or not. So you can figure that out first. But overall, although there's a few constraints you need to just plan for that we just talked about, overall, this has kind of been the best long-term, low-cost option we found to keep that US number in France.
Yeah, definitely. And when you're ready to transfer your number, here are a few simple steps. On your computer, tablet, or phone, first open a Google Voice account. You select the option to port or transfer your existing US cell phone number into Google Voice. The phone number that you request to port over will then receive a text with a 6-digit code that must be entered into Google Voice to kick off the transfer process. Next, you're also going to need access to whatever your current phone billing plan information is. You're going to have to provide specific information about your existing account to just ensure that it is your account and you have the authority to transfer service.
Yeah.
After you start this process, porting or transferring your US number will automatically cancel your existing phone plan. So make sure you're ready for that too.
Yeah.
This usually takes a day or two to complete and finish up.
Yeah. So again, clearly we feel like we can't say this enough. You got to do this before you leave the United States. Google Voice states very clearly you cannot transfer your US number while you are physically located outside of the continental US. We know this for sure because we tried this with my number after we arrived in France and it didn't work. We had to wait until I went back to the US for a business conference to complete the transfer.
I thought we could beat the system. But...
Yeah, we did. We thought, anyway, it doesn't matter. But, and yes, you can try doing this with a VPN, but we have seen very mixed reviews online about the success of doing this. And I mean, again, it didn't work for us.
No.
So far, the only problem we have encountered with using this for authentication text was from one of our financial accounts. And it was basically for a brief period when we moved, but we were able to contact them and change to get authentication codes to email instead. But we haven't had any other problems with it.
Yeah, works great. Okay, now for getting a French phone number and cellular service here in France.
Yeah.
Okay, first, you will need a French phone number. End of story. If you're moving here, you'll need it for everything from text notifications from immigration.
Very important.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, to setting up, an account for new insurance, to just getting deliveries delivered to you at your home.
Yeah.
So there's no avoiding this one, and the sooner you do it, the better. Now, if the thought of having to deal with the phone plans the moment you step off the plane and doing it all in French is filling you with dread, I completely get that.
Oh my God. Yeah.
But hang in there. There are some good options, and it really just isn't that hard.
Yeah.
First, there's 4 big cell providers in France. These are Free Mobile, Orange, SFR, and Bouygues. They all offer pretty good coverage in most of the country.
Yeah. You'll find sometimes, just like in the US, there's pockets where, one provider might be a little better for you if you live rural. But
yeah, all offer a map system on their websites that you can look up where the coverage is stronger, where the coverage is weaker, so you can look at the specific coverage areas. For each of these, there are stores all over France. You can walk into any of them and walk out with a SIM card for service and be all set up. These companies also do have websites that allow you to sign up for new service. But there are going to be 2 potential problems that you may run into as a newly arrived person in France, and these are going to be a lot easier to work around in a physical store location.
Yeah. Okay. So problem number 1, they are going to ask you to provide a French mailing address for your account when you set up service. Very common and normal. But the problem is a lot of times right after you arrive, you may not quite have settled in long term yet, and this can be a little tricky, but you're going to need a phone pretty fast before you usually have that long-term permanent address. So just know they don't usually ask for like the justification domiciliaire. It's just an address that they can send billing notices and things like that at. So you really just need to make sure that as you move, you're updating this address on your account, because if there's a problem, they'll be sending mail there. We didn't do this, and keep the address updated once we had set up our first phone service, first phone line. And we thought we had canceled the account, but we didn't realize there was still a small balance due. And since we hadn't been updating our address as we'd been moving Airbnbs that first year, we weren't getting any of the letters that were being sent. And lo and behold, a year later, somehow collections tracked us down to the gîte we were currently renting and sent us a collections bill.
Yeah.
I was horrified. I mean, I have barely ever had like a single late payment in my entire life, let alone ever being sent to collections. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a criminal. They're going to kick me out of France. I was freaking out. But Jason was much calmer. But it really did turn out to be no big deal. We just like paid the overdue bill. There was a very small fee. There are not credit scores here in the way there are in the US. So my whole life here in France was not wrecked. And we moved on with life. Okay, so that was a very dramatic story. Just to illustrate, you're going to need to provide an address. And it's okay that it's not your permanent one. Just make sure you keep updating it online.
Right. The second potential problem, though, is you may be required to provide a French or European bank account in order to set up monthly billing. It is very common here to have recurring bills deducted directly from your bank account each month. And as an American, this felt very invasive to us.
We're like,
first.
What?
Yeah. In the US, we put all of these kinds of recurring auto billings on our credit card in case of fraud. I think that the credit card can usually act like another layer of protection between you and anyone else, having direct access directly to your bank account. But credit cards, as we know them in the US, are quite uncommon here in France.
They don't really exist.
Not particularly, no. And some providers will not allow you to set up any kind of regular monthly phone service with just a credit card. They will require you to enter a French bank account number, which you are going to have eventually, but maybe not that first week when you need your phone.
Right.
So don't panic.
We have a little bit of a workaround for this problem for when you first land. So the free mobile stores, and we've seen this in multiple large cities, so I don't know about if you're in a really small town, but they have these like super convenient electronic kiosk machines inside their stores that allow you to put in your credit card, type in your name, your address, the phone plan you want, and voila! A French phone number is generated and a SIM card pops out. Then you just take that SIM card, pop it in your phone, and you are set up to go, and auto billing will start to that credit card. So you just bring your passport to prove your identity and the credit card to pay. And same thing as I mentioned before, while you do need to give them an address to set up this account during this process with the kiosk, it's not necessary to provide any like official documentation for the address like it is in some other, to set up some other things in France. There's also another temporary option, which we will talk about at the end of this video, the Orange Tourist Plan. They will also accept a credit card when you set it up online. So hang around for info for that one when we get to it. But there are ways to get through this period before you have a IBAN number associated with a French bank account. You
may still be breaking out in a cold sweat about having to go into a cell store. We want to just put your mind at ease and talk about what that experience has been like here, because I think it's been really different than when we were in the US.
Yeah.
Every time we had to go get new phone service or a new phone in the US, it was like we had to prepare to run the gauntlet. If you were going in the store, it's just a dreadful experience that I don't really wish on anyone.
I mean, I don't know. Like our French viewers are probably going to be puzzled by this because we just haven't seen the same things. I mean, in the US, like you go in, and there's always a sales guy who's going to get a bonus if he tries to convince you to upgrade to the $3 million a month plan with 12 options that I don't understand and I will probably never use. And then they're going to throw in this upgraded phone for free.
And you go through all of that usually to just get okay service with limited data for like $100 a month.
After you've lost 2 hours of your life you'll never get back. Anyway.
The experience for us has felt just totally different here in France.
Yeah.
For starters, every American we know has been just completely shocked at the price of cell service here in France. For our family, we have 3 lines with free mobile. Each is a 5G connection, 300 gigabytes of data each month, unlimited calls, texts, unlimited calls to North America.
Important.
Plus, additional 35 gigabytes of data for when we're traveling outside of France. All this comes in at 20 euros a month per line.
Yeah, that's right. Juliana has a phone now, and we are still paying less than $100 a month for all 3 of us to have phones. It's crazy. We found the biggest variable specific to our situation from plan to plan and provider to provider is probably the international calling that you want to look at. At least when we're making this video, at this point, Free Mobile currently seem to have like the best price international plan for us for calling and texting back to North America, and also a strong coverage in the area that we live in. So we chose them. So of course, when you arrive, you'll want to compare plans, but the good news is it's felt much simpler and more straightforward to like compare and choose a plan here than it did in the US.
Yeah, I think so. You know, those long-term multi-year contracts that lock you into phone service with the exact same provider that are so common in the US, those do exist here. But they're really only useful if you need to finance a phone.
That's the only place we've seen them.
So if you already have a phone, there's just no good reason to choose one of these fixed contracts, especially when you first arrive.
Yeah, so it's another reason not to worry, because if for some reason a phone service isn't working well for you, you can just change.
Yeah.
So one last potential problem for your first few days of France, for your first few days when you land in France and you're figuring out this whole phone thing. So we did talk about, like, you've got to port that number before you leave the US. So if you've done that already, you're going to land in France with no cell provider, right? So that's okay if you can use the airport Wi-Fi and maybe go straight to an Airbnb that has Wi-Fi. But then when you're out walking around the city the first few days, I mean, you're not going to have coverage to use Google Maps or anything like that. So if you don't want to have to think about this, like going straight from the airport to, set up cell phone service, there is another option we want you to know about to cover that gap so that you have got phone service when you land. The short-term solution to bridge the gap that you can set up before you leave the US is Orange has something they call a tourist plan. You can buy it online ahead of time, and it will give you a French phone number, and you can use it for up to 4 weeks of phone and data coverage that you can turn on literally the moment you step off the plane in France. So you'll set this up ahead of time by opening an account online, and you can do this using an American credit card. They will either mail you a physical SIM card ahead of time to put in your phone when you land, so make sure you have enough lead time and an address to actually receive this. Or if your phone is eSIM capable, they will just email you a code and you'll use it to activate the plan when you're ready. So after the 4 weeks, if you want to keep this same French number they've assigned you on the tourist plan, then you're going to have to do a few more steps, which will include like providing proof of identity and setting up an account, and they'll give you instructions on how to do this. But this is a really nice option if you just want to make sure that you are going to have coverage the moment you land, and just buy yourself a little time to figure out who your long-term provider is going to be and not think about it the second you show up in France and you really just want to go get a crystal.
Yeah, sometimes easy is best. We hope now that you're feeling empowered to just say goodbye to the highway robbery of US cell service and hello to a brand new French number that's going to give you everything you need at a lower cost. We've linked the French phone providers in the description down below. You can also download our Moving to France resource list to find lots of other helpful resources for moving to France.
All right, good luck. Thanks for watching.
A bientôt.